Hi, and welcome to A New Day with Susan. I'm Susan Yockey, your host. And today I am with Adam Baker, husband to a wonderful wife, father of 6 awesome children. And Adam is a manager of a cybersecurity for the non-governmental organization, owner of lead trainer at Home Defense University, and owner of Concealed Carry Plus. Adam is currently pursuing a Master of Science in Information Security from SANS Technical Institute and an occasional speaker. Adam, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Susan. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, I'm really excited about having you on my show after speaking with you and hearing your story and the message that you want to get out there, and then all these amazing things that you do for your community and for our country. So the first question I have to just kind of get us started here is, what does courage mean to you?
Well, I appreciate your question. I appreciate the theme for the month that you're hosting this month. To me, courage is the willingness to do what needs to be done regardless of how you feel about it. I know C.S. Lewis once wrote that it might be a more difficult thing for somebody who's afraid of heights to climb a tree to get a cat down out of the tree than it is for a naturally brave person to charge a machine gun nest. And he would know something about it because he served in World War I. So that's kind of how I would frame courage. It's the mindset to do what you know needs to be done, even in the face of fear, which is normally the thing that would debilitate me or anybody to keep us from doing what needs to be done.
That's great. I love that quote. That's awesome. So when is a time, or maybe the biggest moment in your life, where you've faced that fear and you felt the most courageous?
Gosh, that's a good question.
I'm sure there's probably lots of moments.
Yeah. I think it was in coming to terms with post-traumatic stress disorder after a combat experience that I had in the Philippines. And I was a Special Forces soldier. I enlisted after 9/11, and this wasn't my team of guys that I ended up joining had just come back from Afghanistan, so they had been in much worse engagements than I had been in. And so this was just a 1-2 hour firefight that we were in. And so it took, the PTSD really didn't hit me for about 2 years until after the experience. And I didn't really understand what I was feeling. I didn't understand why I was feeling it. It was disconnected from the experience itself. I didn't understand why all of a sudden my feelings were cut off from me. I didn't know why I wasn't feeling. I had, at the time I had all these children, and I didn't understand why I wasn't feeling the normal feelings of a father for them. And I couldn't feel anything. And that was kind of the biggest symptom. And so the desire, the need to get, I felt guilty because I didn't see any of my other teammates having this kind of trouble. And of course, you come to find out later on, you have no idea what people are feeling on the inside. But on the outside, everybody else looks, fat and happy and just like life is still life and everything is normal. And it wasn't until I think I just realized that, I wasn't going to, I think, and maybe this is a weird way of putting it, but I think my fear of being shamed, or my fear of going and getting help. Once I realized it was PTSD, which some comments a friend of mine made about another Special Forces guy I was teaching with, actually, once his experience triggered in me and went, that's probably what this is. I at least ought to go get it checked out and see if that's what it is, because maybe it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Once I realized that, the funny thing is, it was the greater fear of losing my relationship with my children, that I would do something or not do something in this pathos, in the state I was in, that would do permanent damage to my relationship with my wife or my kids, that drove me to seek help.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's coming, I never even thought about it until right now, but I don't know if that's courage or not. If it was the greater fear that drove me to do the thing that I was afraid to do, I don't know if that's, I guess in one sense it is, and maybe in one sense it's not, but it pushed me, that fear of doing something that it would hurt my children, and maybe it's not fear, maybe it was just greater perspective. Because the thing I wanted most was to make sure that my relationship with my wife and my kids was solid for our lifetimes, and beyond. So that was what motivated me to go and get over the stigma, get over the guilt of why am I feeling this when guys who've done 10 or 100 times of what I've done don't seem to be having this problem. And so that's what got me over the hump.
Mm-hmm.
And I that's probably been one of the biggest psychological, probably fearful barriers I had to break.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to acknowledge you for serving our country and putting your life in the forefront to protect us. So I just want to thank you for that. And I say it's courage. I say it's courage because, first off, it's not an easy thing, I'm sure, for a man to recognize there's something going on over here, and then to be noticing that, just to be aware of that, and then because of that awareness, it brought forth some other people to talk about it, your friend. And when I think that, to me, is the beginning of noticing, and then it takes the courage to go from that point to push through the fear of how it's going to affect your family. So definitely total courage. I can see that right away. And then, so what, have you always had an interest in, I know you said you were in the Green Beret. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? What's that?
Sure. Yeah. My father was a police officer during the Vietnam experience. His first day on the job were the riots at San Jose State in 1969. This was before they had a police academy. It was, they hired completely on character and physical strength. And it was, once they passed all the tests and the board and everything, it was, do you have your gun? Yes. Is it loaded? No. Okay, load it. Here's your gear. Here's your riot gear. Good luck. And they put him in a team, and they went out to work. And he was always shooting. Even as a kid, he was an excellent shot. He was a world-class marksman. And so I grew up shooting, and kind of thinking tactically was a family hobby of ours. Dad built a range in the pasture behind our home, and we grew up shooting. And so I went to college on an ROTC scholarship, but ended up quitting school 2 years in and paid the scholarship back, and kind of thought that part of my life was over. That was in 1994-ish. And then got out of school and got into sales, did okay in sales, and then 9/11 happened. And while I was in school, actually, in between my freshman and sophomore year, the Army had sent me to airborne school to learn how to jump out of airplanes. And then right after 9/11, my wife was running a marathon. And one of the teams she was running with was some of the guys were actually Special Forces guys that were running with her. And so we got to talking, and they were saying, hey, we're always looking for people. And I had, mentioned the previous experience in the airborne school. And so I felt after 9/11, I just couldn't, a lot of the old feelings returned. I'd kept up with shooting and just kind of kept in the tactical realm of things. Mm-hmm. I was always oriented that way. And it was funny that, when I say tactical, I mean, we weren't nuts or anything, but we would go into a place and the police officer and dad would switch on. And so we would play games like, dad would say, what would you do if someone came in with a gun? And it wasn't a kung fu type question. It wasn't we'd break out the nunchucks or we'd beat everybody up. It was okay, go through your priorities. What's your priority? Well, I need to take care of my family first. Okay, how are you going to get them out? How are you going to get them out safely? What are you going to, so it was that kind of establish your priorities and how would you do this really? So that's what I mean by tactically oriented family. So I knew that because of the things my father had taught me and the love of freedom that I think was always within me, after 9/11, I didn't feel right that other people, I knew the fight was coming and I knew it was going to be a long time.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel right that other people would be putting their lives on the line and some of them dying, I knew, to defend myself and my family while I sat at home and did nothing but pay taxes. So that didn't sit well with me. But I also knew at the time, 9/11, I was 27. I had a mortgage. I had 2 kids. I was about to have one more on the way. And I already had a decent skill set. And so I knew that my wife and I had decided if I was going to go, I was going to go with the best. I was going to try out for the best. And so we were fortunate to live in an area where we had a Special Forces National Guard unit. And at the time, that was the only way to come in as just a civilian off the street. You go to basic training, advanced infantry training, all that was in Georgia at Fort Benning. And then you'd go to airborne school if you hadn't already done it, and I had already done it in my case. And then you went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which is where all the Special Forces training happens. And you go to Special Forces selection. There's a little pre-selection course where they get you ready for some specific things you do there. And then you go to selection. And selection is 3 weeks of them deciding whether or not they want to have you. And so it's a lot of it, the vast majority of it revolves around what you can do alone. It's not, that's where it kind of, everybody asks, well, what's the difference between a Green Beret and an Navy SEAL and an Army Ranger? For SEALs, the majority of their training happens as a team or a boat unit. They do that stuff together. For Special Forces guys, at least the selection process, almost all of it happens individually. You're evaluated by yourself. In fact, in a lot of training, the vast majority of the training, you are physically barred from assisting anyone, and they are barred from assisting you. So, in fact, you're kicked out if they find you helping someone or you receiving assistance. Wow. They want to know what you can do on your own. Yeah. So, a lot of the training revolves around, can you get somewhere on your own at night wearing about 70 extra pounds of gear? So you've got a rucksack with about 45 extra pounds of stuff in it. And then you're wearing a bunch of other junk and you're carrying an 8-pound, we call them rubber duckies. It's an M16 simulator. They don't really give you M16s because guys forget and leave them against a tree kind of thing because it's in the pitch black of nighttime and these are trainees, so guys are learning. But you walk for 4 days of the 3 weeks, you walk about 20 kilometers a night. They figure that over the 3 weeks, you end up going about 300 miles, the vast majority of it with that 70 extra pounds on you. So that's just the selection process. The rest of it, and the whole thing for me was 2.5 years from the time I got to Fort Bragg to the time I left. Wow. And a couple of that was elongated for a couple of months in 2 stints just because of minor injuries. But so I went through the weapons sergeant course, which is, you got 4 basic specialties. There are weapons in the beginning. You got 4 specialties. There are weapons sergeants, communication sergeants, engineer sergeants, and medical sergeants. And so I got to choose, coming into the Guard, I got to choose my specialty, and I wanted to be a weapons sergeant. So you learn, because the Green Berets they're a 12-man team. They're designed to be dropped anywhere in the world, and their mission goes all the way back to World War II. The teams that were dropped behind German lines to help raise the resistance against the Germans, the guys who were dropped into France, into Holland, in some cases even into Germany and Belgium, who were organizing the resistance and running sabotage missions with the French, with the Hollandese behind the German lines. So after that happened, those were called the OSS, the Jedburgh teams. After that happened, the department of what became they took the core capability and split it off and founded the CIA, and they founded the Special Forces. So that's kind of the genesis of both those organizations. So that's what Special Forces does. It's a 12-man team, and their mission is to go in and be able to spend months in enemy territory, organizing people who are, disgruntled with the Russian government or whoever at the time, if it was Soviets or wherever, organize them, train them, equip them, and then lead them on missions in preparation for an invasion if that were ever to happen. Yeah. So that's why you have your own medic. That's why you have your guys, your weapons guys, who can work on the bulk of the majority of the weapons that are used anywhere in the world. So we train on not just U.S. weapons, but AKs and recoilless rifles and anti-aircraft weapons and all kinds of crazy guns that you don't see in the American arsenal. So it was a great time for somebody who likes that kind of stuff, but of course it's exhausting, and
I bet.
It's but if you enjoy it, it's a ton of fun. It just wears you out. And you have to learn a language because it's a foreign being their capability. So I spent 6 months learning Thai.
Wow.
So that was I enjoyed it. Because I already spoke Spanish, but heaven knows the Army has enough Spanish speakers. So they wanted, because half the Army's Puerto Rican, it seems, but they sent me to learn Thai there as well. But so anyway, I did finish that in 2005, and then almost immediately began preparing to deploy to the Philippines. A lot of people don't know that much of 9/11, all of the 9/11 hijackers actually moved through the Philippines when they came over to the United States. Much of it was planned in East Asia. It wasn't planned in the Middle East. It was actually planned in Southeast Asia. And then they moved through the Philippines and went that route to come into the United States to execute it.
Wow. Well, I hear just a pattern of courage throughout your life. I mean, first off, go to college, then you go into the military, and it's wow. So what would, and a lot of that language to me, I have to be honest, I am not familiar with, but it's definitely interesting. And I love how it was a natural process or a thing for you. And I'm sure you had some fear, moments of fear, and you just pushed right through it. Sounds like it was just courage is just part of your DNA. And what I want to talk about is share with me the part that you shared about when you were, what you believe brought on the PTSD while you were away.
So a week before I was to come home from the Philippines, we had not had any shooting. A lot of tension, a lot of things, a lot of times the shooting there actually happens associated in some weird political ways in association with their elections. Mm-hmm. But so there had been a lot of tension, but nothing crazy until this morning, literally 7 days before we had been there 8 months, and it was right before we were supposed to come home. Yeah. So we were getting to the finish line, but we couldn't relax. Yeah. And we get some intelligence that says we're probably about to be attacked today. It wasn't directly, but we interpreted it as, all right, somebody's going to do something stupid, and we're probably going to get hit. We were advising a couple of Philippine military battalions on a small encampment in the middle of an island that's really 70 kilometers by 40 kilometers. And there are 5 other teams on the island doing the same in other locations. And then there's a headquarters element up at the top northern part of the island who's kind of coordinating things. And right as I'm the intelligence sergeant at the time, so it's my job to report the intelligence that I've just received because I'm the one who's just had the conversation. And I'm literally typing the report to the headquarters to say, hey, look, just so you know, we're probably going to take some fire today. And I hear what sounds like popcorn going off outside. So we start catching it. It's a couple of rounds at first, and then it's going off all over the place. And so I look at my team sergeant, who is my good friend, standing right next to me because he and I were typing the report together. And so we come around, and our team house is literally it's a team house in the sense that it's made out of wood, but it's bamboo lower half. It's just bamboo siding lower half, and then it's mosquito netting upper half with a tin roof with thatching on top of the roof just to keep the rain from being so noisy at night you can't sleep. Mm-hmm. So now on the outside, we put sandbags around the outside walkway so that if we took fire, we'd have some sort of cover. But the house itself is really unreinforced other than the sandbags. Mm-hmm. So we grab and I just run to my room. I throw my body armor on. I'm literally wearing shorts and sandals. I throw my body armor on and I throw my helmet on. I grab my M4 and I run out, and I grab my M60. I'm carrying a Vietnam era M60, but it's a great gun, and I throw it up because my job is to watch the front gate, because if we were on a slight hill above where the road where people could come into the little Philippine military camp, and we're on a very steep hill. Yeah, some roads had been cut into, and so behind me, all the fire's coming from behind me, very up the very steep hill. So behind me, about 15 feet, is a hill that's probably 8 to 9 feet high, and it had been flattened on the top of that hill because the Filipinos had put a basketball court up there. They'd actually flattened it and put cement on it. And up on the top of that hill, right next to the basketball court was the Philippine headquarters, where the battalion headquarters was. So, and it was just literally, it wasn't even like our team house. It was just thatched sides, a thatched roof, where their headquarters was. And so we're catching all the fire. And what they were doing was that the people that were attacking us they had a couple of spotters who were shooting automatic 7.62 machine gun fire down. So automatic fire. And then they were spotting for guys who were sitting just behind the hill, and they were shooting grenades over the hill and dropping them down. They were trying to blow up the fuel dump, and they were trying to hit us. And so they were hitting us pretty well, but we couldn't hit them from where we were. Mm-hmm. So I have teammates on the house side who are down with trying to get at them from the sandbags, but they can't see them because it's the Philippines. There's foliage everywhere. But for me, I'm hearing the grenades coming in, and a couple of them are actually hitting the basketball court. Like I said, it's about 15 feet behind me, and they're hitting probably 15 yards behind that on the basketball court. Yeah. And I have this thought as I'm doing this, and I'm having to focus on the front gate because the front gate is a gate only in the in the technical sense. It's a large, thick piece of bamboo on a rope that they would pull up. They would pull the rope up on a pulley, and the bamboo would go up. But if somebody wanted to ram, the concern was the fire behind us is a feint, and somebody's going to come through with a truckload of troops at the front gate, and that's going to be the real attack. So that's why I would be the last line of defense with a machine gun to stop that from happening. So I'm duty bound to watch the front gate when everything in me wants to turn around and just start mowing the entire hill with this M60. And but my duty puts me this way, and while I'm watching this way, I have this image of myself. I have this image of one of these grenades making it over the court and landing on the road. But the thing between me and the hill where the basketball court is this little dirt road where we would park our vehicles at times. And I have this image of this grenade landing behind me on the road, and me catching a piece of shrapnel in the back of my neck, in my either in my brainstem or in my spinal column, right in between my helmet and the top of my body armor, and me dropping down dead. And I have this this mental image in about, I have no idea how long it took. It's probably 3 to 5 seconds. And it's one of those, your life flashes before your eyes moments. Never really had it since. And in that time, I kind of take my spiritual temperature and I go, all right, if this were to happen, if this is the end, if this is a premonition, kind of where am I with the Lord? I grew up a spiritual person. I've been one all my life, and that's how my mind went.
Yeah.
I say, okay, I've done my best to live a good life, and I've repented of things I've needed to as I've gone along, so I think I would be okay with him. I know I would be. But I'm sure going to miss my wife and kids because they're waiting for me to come home.
Yeah.
And I got really, really angry that somebody was trying to keep me from going home.
Wow.
And that made me, I was enraged and I really wanted to kill somebody. I mean, and I see guys about 200 yards away, and what I'm actually hearing is 2 separate attacks on the hill at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know it at the time until a few minutes later. We hear that the guys over on the other side of the hill are getting attacked as well. But I'm seeing guys running up and down through the trees, and a lot of the Filipinos weren't properly outfitted. They didn't wear full uniforms. They were wearing shorts, and so you didn't always know who was who. You didn't know if you were dealing with a good guy or a bad guy because you're seeing guys running through the woods with flip-flops and guns, and you had no idea if they were good or bad until they start shooting at you. So I'm seeing guys, and I desperately just want to start shooting. And it takes every bit of training and moral discipline not to just start cutting loose.
Yeah.
And I think later on, having acknowledged that I felt that desire was extremely embarrassing to me, just morally shameful. That I thought, I've never, ever, ever wanted to indiscriminately kill anybody before or since. And and I'm glad I didn't because they were our guys. They were the guys we had been advising. Mm-hmm. So, but just even acknowledging that I felt that way was really painful. That whole episode. And then there were some other things, that one of my PTSD triggers turns out to be, in a weird way, is bureaucratic indifference, because we had 2 Filipino armed helicopters fly over, and we got on the radio to our headquarters and said, hey, can we get some of that? Can we get them to strafe the hilltop where we're getting fire from and get them to, either kill those guys or get them to back off? And our headquarters says, well, are you guys asking or are the Filipinos asking? Because technically, since they were Filipino military helicopters, the Filipinos had to be the one to make the request. Mm-hmm. And we were like, how about you guys dot the I's and cross the T's later and kill the guys who are trying to kill us now? So there was all that kind of ball of wax that was happening at once. So that's what, afterwards it was great. Now that goes on for about an hour and a half, and there's this pause, and then later on they start up again from a different angle. And finally they came together at a different spot that we could identify, and we called in some artillery and just blew them all away. So that's kind of how that ended up. And so, like I said, I had gone to, a lot of my team had been to Afghanistan, and they had been through lots of these things. They had been through a lot of it, but this was my first. And so like I said, it didn't hit me, didn't freeze me. I did exactly what I needed to, did exactly what I was supposed to, performed the way I was supposed to. But a couple of years later, all of a sudden, I start feeling a lot of things I can't explain. Yeah. And I can't put my finger on it. It's not like I only dreamed about this once. It was a really, really weird thing. And it wasn't associated with stress or anything else. It was actually, I can get to that dream later if you want. It was actually a spiritual thing, but that's kind of what engendered maybe that's what this is related to.
What do you think triggered the PTSD?
I'm not, I don't know what actually finally triggered it. A friend of mine just said, if it's going to hit you, it hits you at about 2 years. And this was a friend of mine who had probably been deployed. I think his total number of deployments was like 11 times.
Yeah.
These were 11 Special Forces combat deployments to Afghanistan or Iraq, mostly with 3rd Special Forces Group. I mean, he had been there so many times. He was a guy I taught at the Special Forces Intelligence Sergeant's course with, and he was a guy I respected a ton. He was a great dude. And so when he said that, I was like, that just kind of put that in the back of my head. So when I started feeling it, I didn't even realize that it was the 2-year anniversary to the month. Yeah. I was like, it just, his words came back to me. I think that was a blessing.
Wow. Well, yeah. And that way you could work through that whole process. I personally could not imagine. I could, imagine being in your shoes. But then, I could not imagine like actually being there physically. And thank God that you guys are like so trained on this stuff, and that you, so I've heard it twice now, like you just acknowledged this thinking, this way of thinking throughout the process of what was happening. And then, because the thoughts always come before our feelings. So you're thinking, like you had that visual or that premonition, and that, you've got all this going on, and then you've got your training that you're thinking about. Like, I just can't imagine the process of all that happening so fast.
It's funny. It's funny how you mention that, because the training kicks in naturally. It's what you end up doing.
It's almost like, that's what I was saying about like your courage. It's almost like it's part of your DNA. It just kicks right in for you. But what was different for you this go around was because here you are, you're just living life. You're not, under any kind of attack or anything. And then something triggers, and that memory, that thought of your friend saying that, and then bam, you're like in this place of reliving stuff that happened 2 years before.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what had you work through that? And how long did it actually take you before you finally reached out to get support? And how did you work through the PTSD?
It was a few months before I finally realized what it was. I mean, because it was kind of, honestly, it kind of snuck up on me gradually. It wasn't, I don't think it was I still don't know that I would know an initial particular trigger.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of snuck up on me. Because it was the thing that I noticed the most, like I said, was it felt like just my feelings were all stopped up at about my upper chest. My brain was registering that I was feeling things, but I didn't actually feel them. So my kids would show me love, and I would say, oh, they're doing something that's showing me love, and I'm feeling love, but I didn't actually feel it. And so I was deathly afraid that they were going to do something that showed love, and I wouldn't respond in a way that would reflect it, and that they would be confused and hurt, and that something that I would do or not do would cause some sort of lingering hurt to our relationship, well beyond after I had worked through whatever I was going through.
Right.
That they or my wife or something like that would happen, or I would snap because I was frustrated because I didn't know what I was going on. And then that trying to be vigilant about what they were doing was being added to the normal vigilance, the hypervigilance that PTSD normally engenders anyway, where I'm checking the mirrors because I've been trained to check the mirrors, and I'm checking the house because I'm trained to check the house, or I'm checking the lock. So the vigilance with them was actually, I think, the most exhausting piece of it. And I was physically exhausted. I wasn't sleeping well to begin with, and my mind was spinning all the time, trying to make sure that at home and at work and everywhere else, I was responding the way I would usually respond or used to respond when I felt normal. And I never got suicidal, but I think the closest thing I got to it was, I have no idea how long I'm going to be able to function like this.
Right.
Yeah. So I had that feeling. And then that was finally when I was like, all right, I'm going to have to get. So I did. I went to the VA. I talked to a counselor there, and she had a worksheet. She said, all right, there were I think there were 28 markers for PTSD, and I had 25 of them. The dream was like one of the three I didn't have. I didn't have nightmares about it. But she's like, oh, okay. So I went to a psychotherapist, or not psychotherapist, psychologist. And I did a couple of months of therapy. She gave me some tools, and I'll be honest. I'm not going to say it's completely done. I mean, I still have periods where I get.
I was actually going to say, when you were sharing your experience from the 2 years ago, your breathing elevated. You could hear it. Like right now, you seem to be a lot more calmer as you're talking, but as you were sharing about that time, you got more excited. Your level of energy increased. And so I was just wondering though, because what I'm hearing is like this connection with the way you were brought up, and your connection to your emotion. And like what you're committed to, what I hear that you're committed to is your family and their safety and your love for them. And when you experience that anger, that kind of rage, that's something that you've never experienced before. What about your experience as a child? Do you ever remember having like an emotional relationship with your father?
Help me understand, what kind of emotional do you mean?
Where you experienced love and the emotional connection that you were talking about having with your children, because you were starting to feel like, you didn't know how to receive that.
Oh yeah, no, my dad was a loving dad. He was he could be a hard guy at times. But only because he was brought up kind of in a hard way.
Yeah.
But he also worked really, really hard to break that cycle.
Right.
And so I very much respected him as someone who, in many ways, didn't have a model for what an involved, responsive dad looked like, and did his level best.
Right.
Set a really good example.
Yeah, I get that. And so do you ever remember experiencing like that kind of anger or rage beyond, way before your time growing up, before military and all that?
I don't, not that I know of, not that I remember like that.
The reason why I'm asking is because it may not, for me, from my point of view, what I'm hearing is like, it wasn't necessarily the trigger of what was happening. It was that strong emotion that you may have never experienced before. And that's what you're working through, is that emotion. Because you said you didn't want to like be like that with your family, and nobody does, of course. And so this is a big step of courage, because first off, I acknowledge your vulnerability of reaching out for support, and because of your commitment to your family, this and your spiritual side of you is what has allowed you to work through this process. I think you are tapping into a different level of yourself that spirit may be moving you to look into. This is just my point of view. And that's what I'm hearing as being so courageous. It's courageous to go through what you went through. But like you said, like you grew up in this, in that format, And I didn't want to sound like maybe your dad was mean or anything like that. That's not where I was going with that.
Sure.
I just wanted to know, like, what was your level of emotional connection? Because it does sound like he was a loving man. And, you know, these days our youth are not connected emotionally. Like, they don't know how to express how they feel. And so it gets bottled up. They have no other outlet other than turning to drugs or and I think that's been like that for ages. And I think now we're just becoming to a place where we're starting to become aware of, like, we really need to be teaching our children how to express our feelings and in a healthy manner. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I just, again, acknowledge you, because you are taking a courage at more of a spiritual and emotional level versus that physical, like you were saying, like this is that big moment, because the other stuff is like no big deal because it was like I was trained, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So huge. And so, well, let's move into talking more about what you're up to today. And thank you so much again for being vulnerable, because I know that there are lots of men and women out there who are dealing with PTSD, and a lot of them don't come forth, you know, because I don't know why, but people who haven't even went through some of the things that you have gone to, what would you tell those people?
Well, I spent one of the other after effects of it was I lost kind of the sense of who I was.
Yeah.
I lost the things I liked to do didn't appeal to me anymore.
Yeah.
Like none of them. I used to love woodworking. Now I really only do it if we need a piece of furniture, but it's not something that I dive into because I want to. I used to love shooting. Now I'm getting back into it with my kids want to do it, but it's not something I crave like I used to.
Right.
So all the things that I really, really enjoyed are like, whatever. And so I spent several years trying to recapture the things, trying to make myself like the things I used to, trying to chase after the guy I was. And that was something else that was exhausting.
Yeah.
And I ultimately learned that was probably time wasted. I learned that when I felt like I lost me,
right,
it's okay to try to find out who the new me is. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of, I've seen people talk about that. And quite frankly, I don't like how some people are talking about that now. I think some people use that as an excuse to break the commitments they've made with the people in their lives. I've seen some of the, I'm not trying to speak ill of anybody.
No, I love that you're being straightforward.
Some of the live, laugh, love stuff that says, when I've lost me, I'm just going to cut all ties to the people in my life, and I'm going to go out and find me. I don't believe that. I don't believe that it gives us an excuse to just cut all the commitments we've ever made and then go out and find us. I don't believe that. But I do believe that we can maintain the commitments to the people we have and still find out who we are on the inside. And for me, it meant, hey, I don't know that I've ever in my past would have, when my wife says, I'd really like to take a dance class. I think before it would have been, that's nice. Have fun with that, but
yeah.
But, a couple of years ago, she and I spent 4 months taking dance lessons, or there are all kinds of things that I'm now, a couple of years ago for Christmas, I asked for a guitar so I can learn how to play the guitar. My kids play the piano, and I'd like to learn how to play the guitar, and I'm still learning. So it's okay to try things that I may not end up liking, but I might. Yeah. And so it's a cool time to go, okay, well, maybe I might never end up liking the things I used to, but maybe some of those things will end up coming back.
Yeah.
And if they do, well, then I've got all these new things that I found, plus all that old stuff. And
Yeah.
so, or some of it. And so I become a much broader person. And in a way, it's kind of like my wife and I ended up, because even after the military, I still deployed a lot when I was an intelligence analyst. And we got to the point where we got in a rhythm where we decided, we realized that, okay, for the next 4 to 6 months while we're apart, when we get back together, we're going to have grown as people. So let's reconnect and find out who each other is, rather than try to remember who we were and do this dance where we try. So it's like that, but inside me. So I can kind of rediscover me every day and do a little bit every day, rather than exhaust myself trying to recapture who I was. So rather than trying to find myself, I'm building myself.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. No, that's really great. It's a great message too. So what about this other stuff that you're doing?
It's like Home Defense University.
Yeah, you were telling me about, like, you're teaching people how to use weapons in the proper way, or tell me more about that.
Yeah. So when I deployed, the vast majority of, there are 100 million guns in this country, and I'm all for it if people want it. I'm not trying to convince anybody to own a firearm if they're not ready or if they don't want that. That's a personal decision everybody needs to make. But the vast majority of America who own guns list personal defense, particularly home defense, because not everybody who owns a gun is going to carry it as a concealed carrier. Yeah. But the vast majority of them who own guns list home defense as one of the primary reasons they have them. And a lot of it's, I either bought it or I inherited it from dad when he died, or grandpa gave it to me. And there's this vague idea of, I'm going to grab it. If somebody kicks in the door, or I hear somebody pounding on it, or somebody breaks the glass or whatever, I'm going to grab it and I'm going to point it. And if they threaten me, I'm going to use it. And that's really the extent of the plan. And the best minds will tell you, and I completely agree, that if you don't have to go out of your room, don't. Lock the door, call the cops, let them come and do their job. The problem is modern homes separate the master bedroom from where all the children or any of the other dependents sleep. They separate them at opposite wings of the house, opposite ends of the home, or on opposite floors. Yeah. So that does a couple of really, really scary things. That puts the intruder between me and my kids. Yeah. So that puts them closer to my kids than I am in many cases. Yeah. Number two, even if my kids sleep on my end of the house, if I hear a noise at night and I get up and I try to round my kids up because I think somebody's kicking in the door, what am I going to do if I get everybody together and one of them's not there? Yeah. I have to go out and find them. The third thing that's probably the most dangerous from a tactical perspective is if I do have somebody coming in my home, and that means that if I have somebody kick in my front door or my back door or whatever, or if I have a brick fire pit in my backyard, I've given the bad guy a brick with which to break my back window, and he comes in my back glass, I'm advancing toward my child's bedroom with a loaded firearm. And so if the guy is standing anywhere in my living room or my dining room, chances are on the back side of that living room or dining room wall is the bed where my child sleeps. Yeah. And that wall's not stopping anything. Yeah. So this is all about the whole reason I designed this course is it's how you mitigate. It's creating. Go ahead.
I'm a pause.
Sure. So what this is, it's a home defense planning course. So it teaches parents how to mitigate all of these risks. Because the reason Special Forces or SWAT guys are so well trained is because when they have to hit a house, they don't know what's on the other side of the door. But as a homeowner, you do. Yeah. So you know what your dining room layout is, you know where your kitchen is, and if you're a husband and wife together, you can pre-plan all this. You can say, okay, honey, I'm going to be armed, you're going to be armed, or I am, you're not, or you are and I'm not. And you can say, okay, it answers all kinds of questions beforehand. It's done as a series of questions so that it's completely cut. It auto customizes the plan to whoever's taking the course.
Yeah.
Family situations are different. The, home layouts are different. So that's what it was. It was something I did for my family because I was leaving a lot. And then a lot of my friends who were either special forces or special operations were going, hey, because it's not the same as being in the military. It's not the same as being in law enforcement. Even law enforcement guys, once they see it, go, holy cow, this isn't the same, because when I do this at work, sure.
Sorry.
So anyway, it's the course that I teach. It's a comprehensive course that allows the family members know what to do. It teaches the kids what to do. If there's an intruder, everybody knows what to do, and it allows the parents, most of all, to know the principles of what to do so that they plan it for themselves. So it was something I was teaching a lot to families in the Fort Bragg area, North Carolina, because they were deploying a lot. But a lot of other folks wanted it. So I'm now in the middle of recording it so I can put it up online and allow others to take it as well. Okay. So within about a month, it should be up online. So I've started a Facebook group, and I'm launching a Facebook page tonight. So if you look at, you can look at Home Defense University on Facebook and you'll find me. Okay.
That is amazing. Actually, I think it's a really great idea. Especially with everything that's going on politically and all the shootings going on. Everything's scary right now. So I think that's a great contribution to be teaching people. It's a really great idea. All right. And I want to just first off, just thank you again for your time and acknowledge you again for serving our country and your continued contribution to serving our communities and even the world. So I just want to thank you again, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you very much, Susan, for your time and your opportunity and for what you're doing for people.
Thank you.